What if the real problem with modern longevity isn't that we're living too short, but that we're living longer without actually liking our lives? As medicine pushes the boundaries of lifespan and healthspan, many people still fear aging, dread decline, and struggle to find meaning later in life. Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind living a longer, healthier, and more purposeful life. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong, an exercise physiologist with a passion for making science simple and life better as we age. In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Kerry Burnight, widely known as America's Gerontologist. With nearly 2 decades teaching geriatric medicine and gerontology at the University of California, Irvine, appearances from the White House to national media, and now an instant New York Times and USA Today best-selling book, Joyspan, Dr. Kerry is leading a much-needed revolution in how we think about growing older. She argues that longevity without joy is meaningless, and that aging well requires more than good genes and good luck. It requires intention, connection, adaptability, generosity, and continued growth. Today, we'll explore the science and soul of Joyspan and what it really takes to build a life you'll love at every age. Dr. Kerry, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. It's my pleasure to have you on here, and I'm really excited for the topic we're going to be talking about today. But before we begin, let's have you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to the study of gerontology.
Well, I am delighted to be on this podcast, and aging well is what I think about a lot, and I really love your work.
Thank you.
And what led to gerontology, I think, was a really early awareness of the process of aging, because I had parents who had high schoolers who had a boy and a girl who were done having kids. And then my mom thought she was in menopause, went to the doctor, who said, "You are having a third child." And so my dad, had gray hair when I was born. And when people would say things about older people, as people do, it felt personal to me, even as a little child, when people would say disparaging remarks about it. Of course, I didn't know that really even was a job. So I went to UCLA undergraduate, and I just got so lucky that a woman came to give a guest lecture and called herself a gerontologist. And I remember thinking, what? So I elbowed my way down after class and said, "Wait, what are you?" And so we just talked about the fact that aging has so many different aspects, right? There's the physical part, but then there's the financial part, and the psychological part, the spiritual part, the policy aspects. So it was really interesting. And I loved the 5 years I got to study gerontology. And then after that, I taught as a professor in geriatric medicine for about 18 years. And in doing so, I had this huge privilege of watching people age. And it was really kind of a front row seat. And what I noticed was, for some people, it was horrific, terrifying, isolating, heartbreaking. And for other people, it was a lovely time. And I thought when I was young that it was just, oh, these are the lucky people, or somehow these are the genetically gifted people. But the more I got into it, the more I saw people would have the same objective circumstances, even the same diagnosis, the same socioeconomic status, the same family situation, and yet one was suffering and one was not. And that really, really made me curious about what that was about.
So we're very much alike in that regard. I mean, I found exercise physiology something I didn't know about, like my senior year in undergrad. Graduated with a geology degree before I knew what exercise physiology was. But same thing is I've watched people age. You see the same thing from a physical standpoint. They're aging well or they're not aging well. And that's where this podcast has, I think, grown over the first 4 seasons, and just going to keep growing as we look at a more transformative type of aging as opposed to transactional aging. And I love your concept of Joyspan. Now, you've said that lifespan, even healthspan aren't enough. Why do you believe that Joyspan is that missing piece in the longevity conversation?
So lifespan is important because to have a long life, you need to live. So it does matter. And I'm, a proponent of maximizing lifespan. And then health span, Peter Attia's work and the work that you are doing about enabling us to be as healthy as possible as long as we can. And they call it the compression of morbidity, right? Like healthy, and then when you die, you don't have such a long suffering period of your health. It's just that in working with so many people, I sometimes found that people would live a long time and they would even be in good physical health, but they were pretty miserable. And that was the part I thought, what are we missing here? And when I tried to think about words, you think about wellness and well-being. I thought, of course, about well span, and I think that's still a good word. The reason that I leaned toward joy is I read an article by the American Psychological Association, and their definition of joy was well-being, life satisfaction, contentment, not this ecstasy, happy, smiley face thing, which, I don't think is healthy or realistic or, leans toward that toxic positivity where you deny the very real challenges of life. But when I saw that about joy, it stuck with me. And I thought, what if I tried to really research and dig into why you'll see somebody in their 90s or 100, and they seemed like they have this energy or vitality or radiance or interest or purpose about them. Like, what is that? And how can I get some of that? And so I coined the term Joyspan. And because it's a little bit different, it's been nice because it sparked some conversations.
And I think we're going to probably steal it a little bit on this podcast. So.
I welcome it. And in fact, I didn't trademark it because my dream was that people would use it the same way that we use lifespan and health span. Then interestingly, somebody heard it when I was talking about it, and then they trademarked it. And then they reached out to me and said, you can't use it. I said, well, the good news is I wrote a book with that title, and I was so blessed that it became a New York Times bestseller. So I told them, I think the cat's a little out of the bag. You can use it, but anybody can use it.
I don't understand trademarking words. I mean, what right do we have to any word?
I know. It was a little bit of a learning process, but all good.
Well, we promise we'll give credit to you whenever we use it.
No, please don't. Please don't.
My poor friend Jay, who kind of coined the SPIES model for us, I give him credit all the time. He's like, you got to stop doing that, because it always comes along with a story about, us and our childhood and that kind of stuff. And he's like, you don't have to keep giving me credit, but he enjoys it. So,
but I love the SPIES model because it touches on, that which I've studied and am interested in. So I think keep using it.
I will. I really like that a lot more than even just my well-centered that I never trademarked that one either. So people are more than happy to use it without stealing it. Although I haven't written a book with that title yet. I've written some drafts of books with that title, but...
Well, I want to read your book, so please do.
We're working on that. We're getting it there. If you're enjoying the Aging Well podcast, be sure to like, subscribe, or follow on your favorite platform so you will never miss an episode. And if you find our conversations helpful, please share the podcast with a friend, because aging is something we're all doing, and we're better at doing it together. And support our guests in this podcast financially by visiting the affiliate links in the episode description below, and use the links or codes provided for discounts on products we have vetted and feel comfortable recommending to our valued viewers and listeners. Thank you, and now back to the podcast.
Good.
But let's kind of talk more about your book and your experiences and whatnot. So, anti-aging culture is everywhere. And, we see it from creams for the skin, supplements, to extreme interventions. And we have, celebrities that are spending billions of dollars to live longer. And it just feeds this idea that aging is such a bad thing. So how does this fear-based messaging actually reduce our joy span?
So fear-based messaging is really lucrative. So when we are convinced that we're not enough, that we're unattractive, that our value is diminished, we then are motivated to do something about it, and then that's largely spending money. So as you said, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And feeding the belief that somehow if you just do everything, quote, right, you're somehow not going to age and not going to die. All you have to do is take one little step back and really think about it, and you go, no, the mortality rate is 100%. I guarantee it. And that's not a bad thing, because if also you think about the world and what it would be like if people didn't die, we would have a really big problem. So if we can first say that, yes, our time on Earth is limited. And when we come into this world, it's pretty messy. And when we go out of this world, it is often pretty messy. And so when people say to me, oh, I just want to age gracefully, on one hand, I understand it and I'm respectful, but also I think as a gerontologist, I don't think it's terribly graceful. I think a lot of challenging things happen and we outlive our partners or we die first. Having adult children, we learn that, things happen with them that is rough, and even our grandchildren. So the way that this gets back to it, so I think that a recognition that we want to live as well as possible. Like we want to, what I call age brilliantly and do it the very best of our ability, not because we're not going to age, but because we're going to age. And so the question isn't how not to age, maybe it's how to age. And there's research out of Yale that I really admire. And they did a really systematic study looking at your age beliefs and how your age beliefs impact your longevity. And in fact, how long you live, your lifespan. And what they found is that people who endorse negative age beliefs, for example, it's all decline, it really stinks, I'm going to be less than in every way, live on average 7.5 years less than those who endorse a growth mindset of saying, yes, there are things that decline, but there are also things that get better as you get older. And the literature really supports that, but we're not doing a good job getting that message out because it's not lucrative. So what gets better as you get older? Here's what we know. You don't care as much what other people think about you, and it can be quite liberating. So I'm only 56, but I'm starting to get a taste of this now, and it is great. When I do something, which we all do, when I make a mistake or say something foolish or blatantly fail at something I've attempted, it's not the end of the world anymore. And I really quite enjoy it. And when I talk to my patients in their 80s, 90s, and 100s, they even have more of that. Other things that get better is appreciating relationships and knowing kind of who your people are and recognizing that we walk through life interdependent, and can get better as you get older. Also, the potential for spirituality, a recognition that things are not black and white, and one that I absolutely love that nobody seems to know about is our problem solving. So for two reasons. One is we have more neurological connection between our left and right hemisphere of our brain. And also we have all of these experiences to draw upon. So I wanted to share an anecdote about this, which is with problem solving, more than even if I would show you a graph, I will tell you about this couple. They, every Wednesday, it was my friend whose name is Gene Cohen, who has passed away. He taught at Harvard. He was a geriatrician and gerontologist, brilliant man. And he would, after work, take his car and drive to pick his parents, who were in their 90s, up at the train station. And so he was late from work, and his parents came out, and this is before the time of ubiquitous cell phones. So they come out very fragile. Their son's not there. It's dumping snow, and they're just standing there waiting for their dumb professor son. Problem solving. They look over and they see a pizza place. So they carefully in the snow walk to the pizza place and they say, "We'd love to have a pizza delivered to our son's house. And when you deliver that pizza, we'd like to ride along in the car with it." And so when he was, got home, there were his parents in their 90s with hot dinner ready to go. And I just think about that. Like, if we could lean into the fact that we have these problem-solving skills that continue to get better if we acknowledge our strength, what a difference it would be in in our expectations of what older could look like.
That's brilliant. I love that story. And I love that you said, "I'm only 56." I mean,
Yes.
That is spoken as a true gerontologist and someone who understands the blessings of getting older and advancing in age. It's like,
Yes.
oh,
And I do, I'm so lucky to, for example, my mom really implemented these practices because I've been chirping in her ear for all these years, as I'm sure you haven't. And she will be 97 in March, and she lives independently. She's sharp as a tack. She is so connected, so interested, continuing to grow. And so I think the fact, okay, so she has so much time on me, 40 years on me. I think, how will I be in 40 years if I keep growing? My goodness, I'm looking forward to that best possible future self. But you do need to picture it. So if you do what many of us do, which is don't think about it, like, I just don't want to think about getting older. I don't want to think about myself at 90. You're not tapping into the power of imagining. So imagining a Jeff, and I'm sure you do this, who is vital, strong, funny, problem solver, spiritual, laughing with friends, like all the things. As humans, we work toward that. But not either picturing ourselves all in a way that we don't want to be, or not picturing at all, we're really missing an opportunity to be the best possible future self.
I promise my students that I'm going to be an elite athlete in my 80s and 90s.
I would put my money on it.
Because it's not hard. You just have to maintain,
Yes.
and you just outlive and, just out-maintain the rest of the population. And eventually, my average strength now in my 60s is going to be phenomenal strength when I get into my 80s and 90s. So
Exactly. And we will have setbacks.
Yeah.
We humans will have stuff that we don't even have on our radar. So knowing that stuff will happen will then not totally throw us off our game. And an example I have is in my early 50s, my retina detached and I lost all sight in one eye and partial in the other eye. So I had a series of eye surgeries and I had a time where I hadn't any vision. So when that happens, couldn't drive, couldn't use my cell phone, couldn't use my computer, couldn't even change the clicker on my television. And it was actually a blessing because it gave me a taste of when the unexpected happens. What I did in the beginning tanked. I felt so bad for myself. I just laid on the couch and ate chips. I stopped being social. I didn't accept help from friends. I was textbook of what you don't do. And I thought, Kerry, you're a gerontologist. give it. So after some time of kind of grieving my old sighted self, I did make a choice. And I did do the little steps that it required to think, how can I still maximize myself and be the best version of this I could be when I'm not sighted? And I could move my body perfectly fine. So I was doing all the exercises by myself in a safe way. And I got back, but that stuff's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And being able to adapt to it when it comes means a lot.
Yeah, you're making me kind of chuckle thinking of my friend Jay, who coined the SPIES model. He's been deaf. I think he was deaf since birth. I mean, I met him in third grade, and he had hearing aids. And but starting in about later college, he started to lose his vision, and so now he's like legally blind. And I had called him once, and he had talked about being up on the roof, clearing off the roof. And I'm like, dude, you're blind. What are you doing on the roof? And, he's not letting let him slow it down. So
yes,
it's great.
It's like finding a way. I admire that so much. Yes. I was listening to a man speak recently, and he had an accident, and he had lost his legs and one arm. And he said how, of course, understandably rough that was for him. But he then said that he met somebody who didn't have he hadn't any limbs. And the person said, if I had that arm, let me tell you what I would do. And I thought, my goodness, wow, yes, that's so true that we can, yeah. There's always something we can do. And a woman that I am blessed to know, she has a lot of health challenges in her 90s, and she has had to move into a skilled nursing facility because she hasn't family. But what she told me a few years ago was that her goal now was to become the most incredible listener.
Let's pause for a moment to thank the affiliate partners who help support the Aging Well podcast. We're not sponsored, and no company pays for airtime here. But when you use our affiliate links, it helps us keep producing thoughtful, evidence-informed content. One brand I genuinely trust is Aura Wellness, especially their Gluteral Plus, and copper peptide formulations. I've spent time vetting their science, their ingredient quality, and their transparency, and I personally use these products in my own wellness routine. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and exploring tools that may help you feel and function better, check out Aura Wellness in the show notes.
And that was her gift that she was going to continue to give, to ask probing questions, to really not judge and take people in and have unconditional love for them. And now I can't wait to go visit her because she's such a good listener. And every time I come, I walk in, everybody is there kind of doing nothing, and people are just gathered around her bed sharing because she is this talented listener. And I thought, wow, talk about investing in something that you can use all life long, like the ability to be the best possible listener. Oh my gosh, yes. So I have added that to my list. Like, may I work on being a much better listener.
So in the book, Joyspan, you identify 4 habits shared by people, like the woman you just mentioned, who thrive as they age. And it's connect, adapt, give, expand. Can you walk us through each of these and why they matter so much?
Yes. So unlike you, that has a lovely acronym that summarizes your approach, in looking at the literature on psychological well-being and longevity, I scoured thousands and thousands of studies, and they grouped into 4 areas, and I really tried to make them spell out a really zippy acronym, and I spent a ridiculous amount of time. And then finally one day I just said, the words are just the words that they are. And they are all verbs because they all take action. So unlike the popular notion that it is our genetics that predict the quality of our longevity, it is between 14 and 25%. So the vast majority of of our experience of aging is up to us. And that's why these things are verbs, because they take action. So these 4 things, you can remember it this way. It starts with a G and ends with a G. And the middle 2 are CA. And I happen to be from California, so maybe that helps. Maybe it doesn't. But the first G is grow. So people who enjoy their long lives, who find a way to find joy in longevity, are those who continue to grow, who decide that they are going to do hard things, pursue what they're curious about, and to take the time to think, what additional goals do I have? Like that lady, for example, who identified that she wanted to grow in listening. I mean, it's not always something that you can see. And there are numerous studies showing that it is continued growth that is one of the predictors. And I think even just having that vocabulary and asking ourselves, what am I growing in right now? What sort of goal do I have? And it takes a little bit of introspection, right? And this is a good time of year for that, which is in 2026, maybe this would be the time that we would get out a journal or just a piece of paper and just write down some things we're curious about, and will be different for everyone. So it could be Bitcoin, not for me, but it could be music, it could be nature, it could be hiking, it could be this incredible podcast that you're doing, and then putting in the effort that on a daily basis, just like we do with our physical bodies, which is building that sort of growth muscle. Okay, so we've done the G. And then we get to the middle 2 letters. So if we go to the next one, it's C, which is connecting. Incredibly robust literature on the value of connection. And the only way that you will have connections that will last that whole 110-year life that you're going to have is to be quite proactive. And I can use my mom as an example. She had friends that she had for a long time, but she outlived them all. So in the same way that we diversify our financial portfolio, we've just got to diversify our social portfolio, which means reaching out and having younger friends, making new friends, and putting yourself out there. So when I have patients come to me and say, I have nothing to look forward to, I have no plans, nobody comes over, I listen carefully because I want to show nice empathy. But then I say, tell me about the plans that you've made. And then invariably they are quiet. I said, who have you called? What have you come up with? And if finances are a problem, which they are for many of us, it doesn't have to cost anything. It could be something as simple as saying, I am going to watch the Academy Awards tonight. Next door neighbor, would you like to come over and we watch them together? Maybe the person will say, no, I don't want to do that. I hate the Academy Awards. That's okay, because we're going to kiss a lot of frogs here. And it requires that proactive leaning into kind of getting uncomfortable and being that friend who makes the effort. So that friend who drives someone else to chemotherapy, that friend who says, wow, it's been 5 years since your dad passed away. How are you feeling today? That friend who has a list of birthdays and sends cards to all those people on their list, right? So that's why it's a verb. Okay, and then the next one is adapt. And adapt we touched on a little bit earlier, and that is, I haven't known anybody who has made it through their life without some real zingers of things that we didn't care for. And in fact, I was writing the chapter on adapting and learning from these Israeli scholars who had studied adaptation. And during that time, our 25-year-old was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I had thought, wow, if it was my 96-year-old mom or my 57-year-old husband or myself, but oh my goodness, our children too? Huh. But again, because I'm so lucky to work with people, I met with a group of 90-year-olds 2 days after I learned this. And amid my mama tears for the situation that I found intolerable, the advice was, yes, you are human and our children have things. So grieve it, feel it, let people help you, let people in. And so I did need to then reach out to friends and say, I'm having this situation that I don't feel like I can handle right now. And over time, you do, right? Even though it's hard and awful, and humans can do this kind of thing, and it's not new. There's that wonderful Man's Search for Meaning where Viktor Frankl was in a German concentration camp, and yet he said the one thing that we as humans can maintain our spiritual freedom by choosing how we respond to things. And I thought that was really comforting, because what I was going through, not nearly as awful as that was, and yet he was guiding the way. So it's none of this is new knowledge. So that's adapting, and that brings us to the final G, which is giving. And so there's really powerful literature on the benefits of continuing to give throughout life. And it requires that we reject the notion that we have nothing left to give as we're older. So if we buy into the societal notion that we are less relevant, less good at all these kinds of things, then maybe we stop giving. And that's a shame to us. But it's also a shame to society, because society needs what older people have to offer. Society needs humility and humor and perspective and emotional regulation. So it also ties very much to the purpose literature. So at UCLA, Stephen Cole, who is an epigeneticist, said that our genes express differently if we feel like we have purpose. And that was a surprise even to him. I think he sort of threw that variable into his studies and then was like, oh my goodness, it's statistically significant. Just people who, all variables held constant, feel like they have some purpose. But purpose is a lowercase p. It's not figuring out how to solve cancer necessarily, because I don't know any of us who are doing that. But little tiny things, like maybe you have lemons in your backyard, and maybe you pick those lemons, and maybe you go next door to a single mother who is, having all the challenges of raising young children. Maybe you bring those lemons over as an excuse. Hey, I had these in my yard. And then say, if I remember when I was a young mother and how making dinner was a busy time, if it would ever be helpful, I would love to come and entertain the children while you're cooking. I mean, that would have been my dream when I was younger. Nobody ever did. And maybe they'll say, oh, thank you, older 90-year-old Kerry. Or maybe they'll say, no, thank you, weirdo. I don't want that. But that's, again, when we say, okay, I'm going to keep offering, keep on keeping on until I find a place to give, because the world as it is right now really needs the givers. So those are the 4 elements that the research supports of the Joyspan matrix. So to summarize, it's grow, connect, adapt, and give. And all our choices, all are small, and all are daily.
Yeah, as I wrote that question out, I have it written as connect, adapt, give, expand, which is CAGE, if you want an acronym, but that just doesn't seem to work. So I kind of like the way you spelled it out.
It isn't expand, and we don't want to be in a cage.
Right. So I stand corrected on that. But I will challenge you on the small p versus big P purpose. I think that it's important that we understand that our purpose doesn't have to be to cure cancer. It could just be to bring joy to one person. We had Rob Kelly on the podcast. I've had him on both of my podcasts. And the first time I had him on, he was telling me, he said, I can guarantee you that I could change somebody's life with 2 words. And he says, walk by someone and say, nice sneakers. And you walk away from them. If you look out back at them, they're going to be looking at their shoes. They're going to be smiling and kind of thinking, yeah, they're nice sneakers. And they're going to treat somebody different.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be this big purpose. It's these little things that each of us can do. And he is so right. You are so right. It is really hearing somebody, or really throwing your head back and laughing with somebody at a moment in the grocery store. There are so many opportunities, and it is these little things that create purpose and that ultimately create joy.
And I like to spell extraordinary with parentheses around extra, because, when we think of extraordinary, again, it's that celebrity, that doctor that's curing cancer and things like that. But no, it's the custodian in the kids' elementary school that, compliments the kids and elevates their self-esteem and, keeps a clean school for them and puts joy and satisfaction into what they're doing that is considered a rather ordinary task, but they're doing it in an extraordinary fashion. And that's where we get that Joyspan.
I absolutely love that. A practice that I have in the book that is research-based, free, and so easy is, our brains, for example, when you buy a certain kind of car, then you see it everywhere. Like, oh, there's a Nissan. So when we wake up in the morning, and instead of thinking, oh, I have this to do and this is hard, we just have the discipline, even maybe with our eyes shut, to think of 10 things that we're grateful for. And so a lot of times, because I'm comfortable, I think, oh, I'm grateful for this warm bed and this soft pillow. And then from there, we go on with it. And what an incredible shift that makes, because then throughout the day, you're seeing more of those things that you called out. And I have a patient who lives with really extraordinary pain throughout her whole body. And what she does as part of this gratitude morning practice is she finds the parts of herself that don't hurt. And she said, wow, even though I have so many parts that do hurt, I always have more body parts that don't hurt. And so she'll, I said, give me an example. She said, well, my ears don't hurt, and my cheeks don't hurt, and my hair never hurts. And, she just went right through it. And I thought, wow, instead of, sometimes I would do the opposite of open my eyes and think, oh, my knee hurts. My goodness, no, that's then what you're going to see and feel and experience all day. So gratitude is a real big part of Joyspan.
I know you've already written the book, but maybe in a future edition, can you join me in my mission to change the spelling of gratitude to include 2 T's in the middle, so it's an attitude of gratitude?
Oh, yes. That would be a good campaign.
That's my goal. So I've written, in fact, I shared kind of just, I think it was like my not profile picture, but the other picture on Facebook, and I just had gratitude written across with 2 T's. And a friend of mine he's from South Africa, messaged me, said, I like it, but it doesn't have 2 T's. It's like, no, that's the way I want it. It's an attitude of gratitude. And so I'm on a mission to change that. We talk about that often in this podcast. It's gratitude with 2 T's. And so I love that. And I love that idea of, we've had people talk about listing, a few things in their journaling in the morning of what they're grateful for. But I love, looking at the things that are the most painful for us, looking past those to the things that are not painful. And that's what gives us our gratitude.
Yes. Yeah. Because every human that you see has stuff that's hard.
Right.
That's something about being human. But also every human has quite a bit of good that remains.
And what's that hard giving us? I mean, sometimes, being an exercise physiologist, I believe in the overload principle, and that, you take Nietzsche's comment that which does not kill me makes me stronger. If I'm not being overloaded, if I'm not having those challenges in life, I'm not growing. So what is there to be joyful for? So.
Exactly.
So speaking of the hard things that happen in life, aging inevitably is going to bring loss. We're going to see whether it's health setbacks in our jobs, our careers, caregiving roles change. We start seeing uncoupling because of death, whether it's a friend or a loved one, or we have divorces. We have so much of this going on as we age. How do you recommend people adapt without losing their sense of identity and purpose?
I think that if we think about what we're investing in, I love to invest in things that have greater permanence. And a lot of times those are interior things, right? So when we cultivate our appreciation of nature or of music or of maybe mentoring someone, things that we value and that we put time into and that we identify as part of our who we are, those are things that can last even with the kinds of things that you mentioned. I have somebody I'm working with now who said, I am not going to be happy now that my husband has passed away. And they have been married for a very long time, and I understand her grief and pain and encourage her to feel it. But I felt like I was sorry that how she was framing it, because I don't think her husband, I know her husband wouldn't want her to spend this next 20 or 30 years so miserable. So we're trying to sort of refocus and think, okay, we don't have this part that was really such a beautiful part of your life, but gosh, what is there? And so she's gotten back to reading, which had given her great joy, and because she was a teacher. So I think that proactively not putting all our eggs in one basket and picking baskets that we can carry for the whole journey.
I think we both stand on kind of not the opposite, but the adjacent ends of aging well. And you're talking about kind of building and developing that internal strength. I talk often about building the physical strength. And I use a lot of analogies regarding training. So what does training our emotional and our psychological resilience actually look like day to day for the people that you interact with on a regular basis?
That's I love to talk about that, because in the physical world, we do have a vocabulary and an understanding and a literature on resistance training, cardiovascular training, flexibility, and agility. Like, we know those 4 parts to it. And we can be thinking, am I doing something that is strength training? And so similarly, when we now have a vocabulary of what the literature shows us on internal strength, we can be proactively going, am I growing right now? Is there something that, and if not, to do something a little bit about it. And so, am I growing? Am I proactively connecting? Am I adapting to something that is a challenge? And am I giving right now? Maybe one day you do all 4 of them. Maybe one day you really focus on, just like some days you have leg day. Maybe some day would be a real giving day where you go out of your way to think, I'm going to find a way to give. But by not having a vocabulary or not having an awareness that internal strength is also built in daily practices, then I think leaving it to chance, a lot of times it doesn't get done. In the same way, if we just said, I just want to be physically fit, but didn't have a daily method to do that.
I think of in my field, there's always the talk about skipping a leg day. So, you don't want to skip give day, or
right.
Just focus on 3 of the 4. You want to focus on all 4 of them that really have that balance in there.
And
so
people
I like
find that with that vocabulary, they find that they're already doing that. They think, oh, you know what? That men's group that I go to for coffee every Thursday morning, that's not frivolous. That really matters. Those friendships and laughing with those guys, that's part of my internal fitness, and I need that. So it's not always thinking what you're not doing. A lot of times it's just recognizing, I am doing that. Look at that. I'm spending time with my grandchild. I taught him how to, change a tire or something. That's really a give, or that's a grow. And sometimes I find myself, I think, I'm doing something right now, and it's all four of those things, And then every once in a while I think, and I'm doing it in nature. So maybe that's number 5.
You didn't come up with a number 5. Wait.
I know. I didn't.
The book had to end somewhere, right? You can't just, that's the sequel. Joyspan Part 2.
Yes.
2.0. So you mentioned your mom, his name's Betty, correct?
Yes.
And how she plays a really special role in your book. Can you tell us some more things that you've learned from her about joy, growth, and meaning very late in life?
Yes. So I started using social media like Instagram a few years ago to try to share some research on growing older. And so my Instagram name is _Gerontologist, Geron. And when I would make a point, it was fine and people would watch. But one day I was visiting my mom and I said, I'm going to, rather than me talk about it, I'm going to put the camera and have my mom talk about it. Well, then millions of people started watching those videos because they wanted an example of somebody who has actually been there, who is vital and joyful and strong at 96. And so she's played a huge role, and we have really learned from one another, and I've watched her implement the practices. And what she would say is that she didn't always have a great attitude. She certainly didn't have an easy life, went through bankruptcy and the loss of my dad after 60 years and a son with leukemia, all the stuff. But watching her implement the practices on a daily basis and seeing what that looked like inspired me and has actually inspired quite a few people. So I feel grateful to be able to share my mom, and I think we need more and more and more examples of people with strong lifespan, health spans, and joy spans that we can look toward, like role models, because we have role models in other parts of life, and I feel like that's happening. So every single day in America, 10,000 people more turn 65. And so it is, leaning into it and letting people know, because actually our lives, our legacy is how our children and grandchildren watch us age. And in the same way that we have felt pretty scared about a lot of the things that we have seen for the people who have gone before us, my hope is that by changing longevity and kind of this new longevity where we don't resist it, but we, do all that we can to savor these long lives, we are then hopefully improving the trajectory of those who go behind us. And I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you're reminding me of this woman I met at church. Every year, my church does a birthday for everybody turning 90 or over. And one of the women there had turned 100. And it was awesome. And just sitting in there talking to her, and I said, so really, what's your secret, to being 100? And she said, oh, well, my dad lived to be 106. Let me tell you about him. And she's, Scape's kind of talking about what got her to be 100. I think she was living by the example of her dad, who I think he was about 86 or so when he wrote his first memoir, and lived long enough that he had to write a second memoir. And he was, I believe, 96. He's the oldest person ever to go to the North Pole. And the Russian sea captain had the engineer form a key for him, which was a key to the North Pole, for him to kind of take with him, because he's the oldest person. And this guy had so many different adventures that he had to keep writing more to his memoirs just to talk about that. And it was just so inspiring, because it was like, oh, we don't have to stop. And, for our kids, we're an example to them of how to live longer. Before we continue, I want to take a brief moment to highlight an affiliate brand that supports the work we do here. As always, this podcast isn't sponsored. Affiliate partnerships simply help us keep producing meaningful conversations around aging well. One product line I've personally vetted and believe in is Primadine from Oxford HealthSpan. Their commitment to purity, scientific rigor, and thoughtful formulation stands out, and I use their products as part of my own wellness practice. If you want to support the podcast while exploring Primadine for yourself, you can find the link in the show notes. All right, so for our listeners and viewers who are a little bit younger, perhaps in their 30s or 40s, what are the most important Joyspan habits to start building now?
I think regardless of the age you are right now, like the earlier the better, but it's never too late. I think step one is to really check how you're thinking about growing older. And so right off the bat, just think, am I taking on this internalized ageism that it's a bad thing to get older and something that I just must avoid? Because that's dangerous and it isn't true. And it's so common. So I never blame anybody. In fact, I would argue that every one of us has ageism and that we have internalized ageism, which is voices in our head thinking, oh no, I've got some wrinkles, or, oh, I don't want to, tell anybody, so it matters, right? And so there used to be a time where, the common misperception is that women couldn't be in leadership positions. And happily now we look back and think, oh, that's so silly. There are terrific women doctors and all kinds of leaders. And so the same thing is, regardless of your age now, really think, my age is a blessing. It's an asset. There are things, important things, that are going to get better as I get older. And I'm not going to buy into this multi-billion-dollar business saying that it's a bad thing or somehow a mistake or shameful.
That's why we always talk in terms of aging well begins at conception, if not sooner. Yes. And how we teach our kids about aging and how we interact with our grandparents and how our grandparents interact with us, I think has a huge influence. I remember my aunt when she turned 30, which was a long time ago, when she turned 30, how devastated she was. And I had in my head that 30 was such a bad age, and I started approaching 30, and I was like, what was she so afraid of? This isn't so bad.
Yes. Isn't that true? That's so true. And I think how we treat people who are ahead of us in the journey, I think a big and common thing that I see is that people erroneously cast older as a second childhood, and that could not be farther from the truth. So older people are not cute, and we don't need to call them honey or dearie and all this paternalistic nonsense. As we get older, we're more adult than we ever were. And that goes for when we have care needs. So you can have a lot of care needs. You can have cognitive impairment, but you're still an adult first. And so I would encourage listeners of all ages to think about how they are framing their lives with their parents and grandparents. And if you think that, oh, I need to rush in and solve the problems, or they don't know what they're talking about, or they're so stubborn because they don't want to do things the way that I think they should do it, it is almost always the problem of the younger person. But it feels good to us to think, oh, that older person, they don't know. I know everything, but they don't. And that's the same as, think back when we were in middle school and we thought all this ridiculous stuff was so cool and so funny. And as you get older, you look back and think, oh my gosh, I was so silly in middle school. I think that can be true when you in your 90s and you look back on how you thought you had everything all figured out in your 60s. Like, no, you haven't lived it yet. And so I think a greater humility for younger people toward older people would go a long way.
I had a guest recently that pointed out that, we have to understand that the person who is turning 90 or 100, whatever they're turning, they've never, or we turning that age have never experienced that before. So it's a new experience for everybody. And it's important for us just to understand that this person is going through something they've never gone through before. And we need to give them the autonomy to do it without slipping into overprotectionism or some of our ageist assumptions.
Yes. That's such a good point. I was with a couple actually very recently, and they were telling me how they just don't want anything to happen to their older mother who insists on being in her own home. And I said, well, let me hear more about nothing happen. Like, things happen. And if the person is cognitively intact, we can disagree, but let people live their lives. And they said, well, what happens, if she falls? It's a good point, because falls really matter, but also, like, we really can't bubble wrap our parents. Or, I had somebody also recently who they insisted against their mother's wishes, who was cognitively intact and loved being in her home. They just absolutely, took the keys away, and they made her move to this place, and she got in the place, and then she fell. And I thought, wow, I understand they want the desire for safety, but also, did you really think it through? Like, our parents are going to die, our grandparents are going to die, but how can we maximize what their definition of quality of life is, like their joy span? And it might not be the same as what we think, also because we're not there yet. So we don't know. We don't know because we're not there yet. And that's where I think that humility comes in.
I think we might be starting to see a lot more of these helicopter parents that are now stuck in the sandwich generation, treating their parents like they treated their kids and having the same issues pop up.
Yes. I think that is disconcerting and true. And we can start even at this age with our adult children or our young children in the way that we are role modeling how we interact with our parents and what we say about our parents and grandparents. And sometimes pushing back with our kids when our kids say, you can't do this, or that would be dangerous, to say, like, you know what, I make the decisions for myself, just as I welcome you to make decisions for yourself. Like, we're not doing a thing where I am in any way the child now.
I don't think I'll be able to use the word can't when I get older, when I'm really old, because we were late having our kids. I was 40 when my son was born. So, they're going to be at a point where I'm going to be pretty old. And, if I do get frail, which God forbid I do, and, me forbid I do, if I say I can't do something, my kids will be like, can't, never done nothing, because that's what I always told them. And I can see my daughter doing that now. What do you mean you can't, walk up those stairs? You can do it. And I'll be forced to have to eat my words and keep moving and keep doing things as I get older.
Yes.
But it'll be healthy for me, so that'll be good.
Absolutely. And it's not, it isn't easy. There will be changes. And, but it also can be quite beautiful and part of the human experience to have the humility to say, I did all these things, quote, right, but still things happen. And It's not that I didn't do something right, or that I'm not blaming myself, or I'm not less than because, I expected, I think about that as a gerontologist. I mean, I could come out with a diagnosis tomorrow, and I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I could get cognitive impairment, like all the things. There's nobody is immune to it. Not Brian Johnson, not Peter Attia, like none of us. And in some ways, there's a liberation in knowing that we are doing the best we can, but it is hubris to think that we're controlling for everything.
And I think the best that we can do is really the emphasis of that spiritual dimension, our sense of purpose, our sense of belonging, our sense of connection, and everything else is the things that we can have the most control over as we age.
Yes. Yes.
And it's woefully absent when we hear a lot of some of the longevity experts you just mentioned as they, present their message. I don't hear the love span piece, the joy span piece. I told you I was going to mess up that joy
No,
span.
you didn't mess up because love is,
Right.
love really summarizes it. And
Right.
if I was going to force it into an acronym about the research findings, it would be love, right? Love life by continuing to growing, love others by connecting, loving what is by adapting, and loving humanity by giving. So I think love span's it's not far off.
All right, good. So it's not a horrible mistake. But now's the time in the podcast where I have to ask you the question we ask of all of our guests. And as I look at you, you said you were only 56. You don't look 56, which is good. Again, not that we should be judging somebody based on their appearance, but you seem like you're doing things well. You seem very joyful, and so you're living it, what you're preaching. But what else are you doing personally to age well?
So I'm learning from people like you about making sure that I'm keeping my body moving. I, noticed that there are changes in my flexibility and my balance, and I am recognizing that I need to work on those things. I've really leaned into strength training and more attentive strength training, so more intentional and more careful instead of swinging the weights around. So I have a lot to continue to learn and to do. It's one thing to know it, but it's another thing to do it. So that physically, I'm also recognizing that I need to be bolder in my social connections, because sometimes it's easy to just hang out with the people that you've always hung out with. And sometimes people grow in different directions. And so I have a few friends who kind of have gotten into a thing of complaining and lamenting and trying to do everything they can to look a certain way or come off a certain way or purchase things. And it's not the way that I hope to do it. So I've been trying to cultivate also some people that I really admire so much. So yeah, there's no autopilot of aging well. I think every day we have a new chance to start, and it's also never too late. So I have some people in their 80s that I'm honored to work with, and they say, is it too late for me? I am not strong. I'm not flexible. I'm kind of alone. I'm kind of a self-proclaimed curmudgeon. Did I sort of miss the boat? Absolutely not. Every single day you think, okay, let's do a little something different. And that's going to put you on a different path. And I've had, as you mentioned, people who basically reinvented themselves later in life so that how they are remembered as the coolest 106-year-old. And that would have been somebody maybe who was pretty awful in their 20s. So not too late.
So if there's one core message you hope readers and listeners will take away from Joyspan, what do you most want them to understand about aging well?
The quality of your long life isn't your genetics. It isn't certainly all the exterior, quote, success. Like, it's not your money. It's not how you look. It's not how cool your house is, or even your kids, where they went to school or something like that. It is quite internal. And that older adults who we look to and admire and want to be like haven't just gotten the lottery jackpot. They have made silent choices every day to cultivate internal strength and characteristics of themselves that will go with them their whole journeys, and that we can all improve in that department, and that nobody has it wired Nobody has all the answers. But what you do today, like this very day that you're hearing this podcast, do one thing that you heard and your life will start to change and your aging will start to change.
It's never too late.
Never too early, never too late.
Yeah. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm just so uplifted, and I feel like I just added about 7 years to my Joyspan from the conversation. Where can our listeners connect with you, find the book, learn more about Joyspan, and how they can make small changes today to be better tomorrow?
Yeah, sometimes people ask who is Joyspan for? Like, what age do I need to be to get into this? And the wonderful thing I found is that I have people in their 20s saying, wow, this really put me on a different path. So it's for everyone, and it's sold everywhere. So you can get it at your local bookstore, but you can get it on Amazon, and they usually deliver it in about a day. And it's a blessing that it is now being published in all languages in all countries. And so that's been a neat surprise that it's not just an American kind of thing. And then if people wanted to learn more about other kinds of opportunities, my website is drkerryburnight.com. And if you wanted to follow on social media, I mentioned the _Gerontologist. And I am so grateful for your podcast, and it's an honor to be on a podcast that I listen to. So I will continue to listen to the Aging Well podcast and continue to learn from you and your guests. So thank you very much for taking the time with me.
Well, thanks for listening. And I benefit probably more than anybody from this podcast. And if I'm the only person that actually hears my guests, and I can change and grow from it, then something positive has happened. But
I'm working with somebody who is 114, and
wow.
I think that you are well on your way.
It's my goal, 120. But again, I don't want to do it if it's just living longer. I want it to be with vitality. I want to live out that SPIES model. So.
That's the thing, because you're doing both. You got the external fitness and the internal fitness. So when you put those both together, you're on your way.
Well, let's say I'm working on the internal fitness. I mean, I have a ways to go, but it's that growth mindset. So there's not one person who can say, "Oh, I'm doing all the physical stuff and all of the emotional stuff." That's the great equalizer. Is that on any given day we're doing some and not doing some, and the next day we think, okay, let me get on those ones that I missed yesterday. Yeah, well, I teach it as an asymptote. My whole SPIES model is an asymptote where we're moving toward perfection. And the closer we get to perfection, the more we realize how far away we are from perfection and how much more growth we have. And we're never going to hit spot on. We're going to be weak in some areas. 1 week I might not be able to exercise as effectively, but I might be sacrificing the exercise for better social connections. And so,
yes,
we can always get better in all those different dimensions, and it's just keep moving toward that betterness and keep aging well.
I'm here for it.
All right. Well, you just keep doing what you're doing. Keep bringing joy to our lifespan and keep aging well.
Thanks very much, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Aging Well podcast. Please like, subscribe, or follow, and share this episode with a friend. And be sure to visit the affiliate links in the description below. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep aging well.